Welcome to the Customer First Thinking Podcast, episode 24. My name is Stephen Shaw, the host of this podcast. In this episode, we interview Chad White, one of the world's leading experts on email marketing. It remains the Rodney Dangerfield of marketing channels, taken for granted as a low-cost tool, often underfunded, given minimal resources, and certainly treated with little respect, especially relative to other more glamorous channels like TV advertising or even social media. Yet, amongst all digital channels, email marketing still rules. Most marketers today cite email marketing as their preferred channel, ahead of organic search, paid search, content marketing, and social media. In a recent study by the Association of National Advertisers, it ranked as the top campaign channel. And more than half of marketers are planning to increase email usage over the next year. Email marketing has stood the test of time, and no wonder. It's affordable, it's customizable, it's measurable, it's extremely effective, done right. It's the best way to engage customers whose opt-in permission has been secured. And the ROI is unbeatable. For every $1 spent, it generates a return of $36. So, why so little respect? It may have something to do with its antecedents. Email's use as a commercial messaging platform only became common in the mid-1990s when people started to get their own personal email address through their ISP provider. But it really took off in 1996 when free web-based email services like Hotmail led to hyper-growth in the addressable audience. We all know what happened next. Inboxes were soon flooded with unsolicited offers. As complaints about spam reached a shrill pitch, regulators and mailbox providers were forced into action. Unwanted emails were blocked out by junk mail filters, bad actors were blacklisted, the term permission marketing came into vogue, and eventually governments responded by ushering in consumer protection legislation like CAN-SPAM in the US and CASL in Canada, which made opt-in consent mandatory. That early batch and blast era left email marketing with a tarnished reputation. Recognizing the threat to deliverability and the risk of being exiled to the spam folder, mainstream marketers responded by improving email protocols and practices. Today, email is used extensively to facilitate transactions, promote special offers and new products, inform customers of news and events, and drive brand engagement. Advancements in technology have made it easier for marketers to create more interactive inbox experiences. And with readier access to all kinds of customer data, marketers are able to offer more personalized, relevant, and contextual content. In fact, email marketing may soon emerge from under the shadow of other digital channels to take the lead in steering the customer journey. But first, marketers have to stop thinking of email as an independent channel. They need to design more integrated workflows based on subscriber interactions. And they need to overcome new constraints, such as Apple's mail privacy protection, which makes it harder to know whether messages are actually being opened. Still, email marketing has faced many other dire predictions in the past and survived. Remember when Facebook Messenger was going to be the ultimate email killer, Slack? Which is why Chad White is more bullish about his future than ever. A recognized expert on email marketing trends and practices, he's served as lead researcher for many of the world's largest email service providers, including ExactTarget, Salesforce, Responsys, and now Oracle. His book, Email Marketing Rules, is now in its third edition. And several years ago, he was named the Email Experience Council's Thought Leader of the Year. So Chad White has a strong historical perspective on the evolution of email marketing and a deep appreciation for its versatility and resilience as a marketing tool. I started by asking him what makes him so passionate about email marketing.
So, I mean, you're right. I'm a journalist at heart. I have a master's in journalism, and I think, like a lot of journalists, like I'm attracted to change. And email marketing is one of these fields that, despite like some naysayers that say it hasn't changed much, it's changed dramatically. I mean, during just the 15 plus years that I've been in this field, there's just been tremendous change. And that's the thing that keeps me like in love with email marketing, is that this constant change and constant reinvention and the constant need to adapt strategies. And that's on top of just the changes in consumers, which is enough to keep anybody busy, really. But there's been tons of technological change, tons of sort of cross-channel interaction changes, and then changes within like email itself, both on the mailbox provider side and on the ESP side. So there is no shortage of change. I sometimes hear some of my peers, like, kind of, who also do like a lot of writing like I do, like kind of fretting about, you know, how am how are we going to find new ideas for things to write about? And I occasionally have like kind of dry spots where I wring my hands a little bit, but for the most part, I feel like there's like a really steady flow of things to talk about. And last year I had all of these plans for things to look into, and then Apple comes along with mail privacy protection, and that essentially, has taken up it destroyed my content plans for the rest of the year. And we turned and pivoted and talked about MPP for like pretty much the rest of the year, and we're still talking about it now. And and again, for me, like that's the exciting part is the change and the need to like critically re-examine what are we doing, why are we doing it, is there a better way, what are the options, what are the pros and cons. I like to think I have a fairly analytical mind for like sort of breaking down, what are all the different paths you can choose. And as much as my book sounds like it's like dictating what people should do, it's hopefully more about laying out what are the choices that you have ahead of you, what are the different directions you can go.
Well, it's almost become a Bible of the industry, too. It's a really good go-to reference source for email marketers, whether you're new to the field or a veteran. Although well, let's talk about this a little bit. The legacy of email marketing. It's, in some respects, it's the Rodney Dangerfield of marketing. It doesn't get a whole lot of respect, but it's certainly been a workhorse for most marketers. It's certainly endured over time. Yet today, people largely communicate through text messaging if they really want to talk to their friends and family. What accounts for emails, continued utility and popularity?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you talked about like texting. That's how people communicate with friends and family. That is a huge, huge distinction. And it's the same way we often use a lot of social as well, is to communicate with friends and family. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about brands. How do brands communicate with people, and how do people want to communicate with brands? And in survey after survey, year after year after year, email has been that way that consumers prefer to interact with brands. I think it's sort of foolish anytime we have like a new social media platform come out, when TikTok comes along and Snapchat and stuff, like the first thing marketers try to do is crash the party. Like how can, like, oh, look at all these people having fun with their friends. How can we burst in the room and grab their attention and do something outrageous and like try to hijack the conversation? And and that's fine, I suppose. we like to go where the audience is, and I think that sometimes that's to our detriment because we just see audience in terms of like sheer numbers. And with email marketing, I like to say like this is an audience that's receptive and that actually wants us there. And so I think that's one of the like things that's really powerful about email marketing is that it's a place where we are actually wanted. And there's lots of places where marketers are constantly sort of butting in and like swimming upstream. And that's, again, I feel like that's fine. Like marketers need to kind of like push and stuff. But email marketing is one of those places where you don't have to swim upstream, like we're accepted. And a powerful channel with tons of capabilities, evolving tool sets, great at personalization, great at segmentation, great at automation, like amazing, amazing capabilities that are constantly growing. That's one of the things I think is really amazing about it and super attractive. But it all kind of comes down to consumer acceptance.
Well, and there's a rub, isn't it? Because that intrusive mindset you're describing, bursting into the party uninvited, if you will, is why consumers respond to a lot of it as spam. The good email marketers treat it more as a relationship tool, don't they?
I think there's been evolving thoughts about the email channel. And for me, it's the best way to think about it is as a conversation that you're in this relationship. It starts with permission, and then you begin this dialogue, and it's kind of a fractured dialogue for sure. This has been one of the things that has very much frustrated me about Apple's mail privacy protection, is that I feel like they've now put barriers between us and our subscribers to have that conversation. In my mind, opens are like a conversational nod. It shows that people are paying attention to what you're saying. Doesn't mean that they like it, but it shows that they're paying attention. It may mean that they like it. Certainly, there are stronger signals like clicks, but I feel like Apple is like sort of put up this brick wall between us and our subscribers, and now we can't see those conversational nods anymore. So we have to either wait and like hear the clicks, or we have to wait until they step out, from behind that wall and engage us in another channel. But yeah, I very much see, email marketing as a relationship where, we send something, our subscribers respond in some fashion, either by doing nothing, which is absolutely telling, or by doing something. And then we should be constantly changing our messaging, our cadence based on that. And it's this back and forth, back and forth. And the nice thing is that, again, our capabilities keep growing and growing and growing. And things like, AI and machine learning are going to really enable us to take that conversation to the next level, over the next decade for sure.
You've been a student, if I may describe you this way, of this industry for 20 years or so. Like, you've been hands-on in many cases earlier in your career, certainly. Looking back, and certainly there's been a lot of change over the last 10 years, but looking back, what do you see as the major inflection points in the growth and evolution of the industry?
Yeah, I do get really annoyed when so-called like digital marketing experts talk about how like, oh, email hasn't changed in 20 years. It seems like, for me, just absolute confirmation that they have no idea what they're talking about. So I gave a webinar with the DDMA in the Netherlands, and I started off. It was all about like these three mega trends in the email marketing industry that are really shaping things: the pandemic, MPP, and the end of third-party cookies. And I started off that presentation by talking about all the ways that email marketing had changed over the 15 plus years that I had been in the industry. And so, for instance, some of those changes include the arrival of smartphones, smartwatches, and voice assistants for reading emails, the arrival of CASL, GDPR, CCPA, so lots of laws. Engagement-based spam filtering was not a thing 15 years ago. Advanced analytics, AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, omni-channel orchestration, not a thing. Dark mode, modular email architecture, list unsubscribe, DMARC and BEMI, annotation, schema, and JSON for controlling envelope content, AMP for email, CSS-based interactivity. That's a really long list of and there's more, but those are certainly the highlights. And those are major, major changes. So if I had to focus that list on the changes that I thought were the biggest, I would say smartphones for sure, because now email is mobile. It's with you all the time. Doesn't have the same immediacy as SMS for sure, but it is always there. So when someone is shopping in a store and they're concerned, am I getting the best deal? They can call it through email. They can search for the brand, whose store they're shopping in, and they can see, hey, what are those latest offers? Let me make sure I'm getting exactly what I want. or is it an opportunity to shop another brand that might carry that same product? So the immediacy with smartphones and email is super powerful. The next one, better laws. I am not a fan of canned spam. I know that here in America, we like as little regulation as possible. I think canned spam has done just tremendous harm to email marketers because it has set exactly the wrong expectations for how to succeed, because we are really not an industry that is governed by laws. We're really governed by consumers and by the mailbox providers. And canned spam, if you were just to follow the letter of that law, you would just be blocked all over the place. You would have a dismal email marketing program. And so I think on net, things like GDPR are way more in line with what consumers expect from us. And I know that there was a ton of reaction to GDPR. I think it was notable that when CCPA came along, that reaction was way more muted. I think that it was fear that drove the reaction to GDPR, and I think now the industry has largely accepted that this is actually a good thing. Respecting consumers, being in line with their expectations, that's a big plus for us. And then the third one I would say that's really huge is engagement-based filtering. So it used to be that if you just sent email and people didn't complain, you were good to go and your emails landed in the inbox. And well, marketers game that. So we bulked up our list full of tons of people who wouldn't complain but didn't really engage, and we used that to drive down our spam complaint rates so that we could continue to get to the inbox. And Gmail in particular, and then others figured out what we were doing, and now they require us to actually send stuff that not only doesn't irritate our subscribers, but they actually engage with in a positive way, which is again exactly what we should be doing. And so that's been really, really powerful, and has caused this shift from quantity to quality, which frankly, like, that's how most businesses run anyway, right? It's the 80-20 paradigm, where your business is really driven by a relatively small group of customers. And the same thing is true with email. Your email marketing success is largely driven by a relatively small group of subscribers. So engagement-based spam filtering, I think it's also been a major sea change. That's also slightly under threat from MPP, unfortunately. We'll have to see how that all plays out.
So, and when we think of email marketing, we tend to think of promotional email. I talked about this earlier, relationship building through email communications. The rise of content marketing, its popularity is certainly, from my standpoint, I don't know if you view it the same, but certainly to me an inflection point. The idea that content matters, that quality content matters, and email is often the primary delivery vehicle to at least draw attention to the content. Is that fair to say?
I think that's absolutely fair to say. That's a beautiful relationship between email marketing and content marketing. That's a great tandem. I remember years ago, I think it was the New York Times, their newsletter team, someone there said that like the emails they send out are like the personalized homepages for their subscribers. I think that's like a really beautiful way to think about it. Like, that's what we should all be sort of striving to do, is take, especially for media companies, for retailers in particular, for any content company. We have lots and lots of content. Being able to get the right content in front of the right people, that's email marketing. Like, that's a fantastic use for that. And so, yeah, I think that quote from the New York Times really speaks to the value that email can deliver, of getting that right content in front of the right people, so to really, really engage them. Because obviously there's tons of stuff, I'm a New York Times subscriber. There's tons of stuff that they publish that I'm not super interested in. So being able to get the right stuff in front of me is powerful.
Well, as a reader, being able to segment the content according to your interest and focus has been a tremendous development within the publishing industry, frankly. And we have a whole email newsletter industry, people creating their own newsletters and sending them out, building their own audiences, et cetera, has been a tremendous extension of the discipline as well.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you about what makes an effective email program. A lot of focus on the technology and the rules, etc. What, in your view, in order of priority, let's put it this way, would you feel are the most important things to get right? You've got design, you've got content we're just talking about, we have list quality, audience depth, segmentation, timing. A lot of stuff goes into a successful program. How would you rank them? What in your view are the most important things to get right for a successful program?
Wow, that's a big question. So, it's part of why I keep writing new versions of email marketing rules, because there keeps being more stuff to be concerned about. So, one of the frameworks in my book is called the hierarchy of subscriber needs, and it's sort of these 4 layers. And it starts by creating respectful email experiences, and that's everything to do with permission. And then the next level up is functional email experiences, and so that's sort of design, QA, making sure that inclusive design, so things that make your email accessible and functional to everybody. And then it's valuable experiences and remarkable experiences, which are about the content and the value you deliver. So you do have to kind of get the basics right, because otherwise that high value stuff that I think we tend to focus a lot on and talk about a lot, obviously things like personalization and AI are really, really hot, but that's the top of the pyramid. That's the upper half of the pyramid. And frankly, it doesn't matter at all if you're flubbing everything underneath. If you've got poor permission practices, your unsubscribe process is unfriendly, if you're not optimized for dark mode, if you're not accessible, if you're not using inclusive design, there's all these places where you create friction before you even get to the content. I would have everybody make sure you've got the basics right. But in terms of what's the most important, I think it really, really varies. And I think sometimes as an industry, we sort of get clouded by what our own areas of expertise are. So certainly my roots are in media and in retail, and I have to always kind of check myself, to get out of my retail mindset and think about other industries and how they might have very different goals or operate very differently. And I think I've gotten pretty good at that, but for a long time I was not so great at that. And I think that's really important. It's what are your goals with your email marketing program? First of all, start with your goals for your company. What are you trying to achieve? And then how can email be a part of achieving that success? And then, all right, what kinds of campaigns can we do that align with those goals? So, I would say start big and start with your company and your business goals, and then narrow it down to program goals, and then try to craft campaigns that do those things.
Well, that's really strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, but sometimes we kind of we jump past a bit of that kind of noodling. Yeah,
that's what frustrates me. People jump right over the strategy part, get into tactics, and get into trouble as a result of that.
Yeah. So it's great to see what other people are doing. I think that's a fantastic way to get inspired, but make sure you're focusing on what you need to do, what's right for your business, because email can do all kinds of things, right? It can generate, direct sales, for folks like retailers. It can generate, great engagement for, content companies, and it can help with retention for subscription-based companies. So make sure there's not one way to use it.
Well, and isn't that a bit of the challenge for organizations, is that there's some fragmentation going on here? You do have transactional emails, you have promotional emails, you have newsletters, you have a lot of different originators, if you will. Do you see that as being a struggle for organizations, that they really haven't figured out a way to make their programs more coherent or cohesive even?
I think it gets more challenging when you start talking about omni-channel. I think that's where things can really start bumping heads. I think within email marketing programs, I think there's less tension between newsletters or promotional emails and then, say, automated emails or transactional emails. I think there's less friction there. I had an interesting conversation recently about, with some colleagues, and it was sort of about like we've gotten to this stage of email marketing development where some of these like really whiz-bang powerful tactics can get overused. So, for instance, like overusing segmentation to where you're actually segmenting out some of your less engaged subscribers that you might still have a chance to engage. So like being too targeted. And I feel like there's definitely risks with personalization in the same way, right? Like, I mean, I feel like we see that already, in platforms like YouTube that just feed you like the same, like, 1 degree off from what you've already engaged with. And what we lose there is discovery. And so I think there's a potential risk of overdoing those things. You're always going to need, curation and getting sort of new things that may or may not hit, but like that's the thing that feeds the automation, right? So you really need broadcast emails. There's a bit of a this kind of slamming of like what we call sort of batch and blast emails, which is what broadcast emails are. And absolutely batch and blast emails have been overused historically, but I hope that rhetoric doesn't make people think that you shouldn't be sending broadcast emails that, are for everybody and speak generally, this kind of curated message, this one size fits all message is still really valuable because you need to send a good amount of those for your subscribers to raise their hand and say, oh, wait, that's the bit that I'm interested in. And another subscriber will say, no, well, this other bit, that's the part I like. And then you follow up with segmentation, you follow up with automation, and you kind of like you take that subscriber into that kind of sidebar conversation where you go deeper. So you need all of these tools. It's kind of an interesting way of kind of thinking ahead that we might actually become so sophisticated that we actually do ourselves harm by getting too fancy and using too much personalization and segmenting too narrowly.
Where do most marketers today have trouble with email marketing? Where do they run into trouble? Is that data corralling and quality? Is it deliverability? Is it inbox clutter? Where are the trouble spots that you see that most marketers run into?
Well, I think one of the big areas is metrics. I think as an industry, we focus way too much on campaign-centric metrics, sending a campaign, seeing how that campaign did, and then moving on to the next campaign. I really, really wish I could remember who said this, but years and years ago in my past life as a journalist, I was at a conference, and someone said that it was a retail conference, and so the speaker said that the retailers of today view their products as their inventory. So they're trying to find and trying to get their products in front of people. And like tomorrow's retailers recognize that their customers are their inventory. And so the goal is really sort of the opposite, is that you have this audience of people and it's about finding the products that they want to buy rather than I have these products, I need to find people to buy these products. And I thought that was pretty profound. I think that's the way that every business should operate. And I think that there were some really nice moments early in the pandemic where you saw some brands recognizing that. So for instance, like Edible Arrangements, they realized that, hey, some of our customers are like having trouble getting food. And so we'll sell the fruit that we use to create our arrangements. And so they were just selling boxes of fruit. Is that off-brand for them? Maybe slightly, but they saw a need among their customers for that product. I thought that was great. Panera, I think, is another one that pivoted, and they started to sell, bread and like sort of acting like sort of a mini grocery store where they would sell staples like milk and butter and bread and other things. In my mind, that's super smart. That's the way to think about your business. Is not I'm buying these products now. I need to find people to buy them. It's I have this customer base. What do they want to buy? What do they need? And and how does that align with my company?
But just back in terms of the actual success of a program, you talked about metrics. Is the issue there that marketers look at metrics from the wrong perspective, that they're worried about the activity metrics that frankly no one in the senior parts of the organization care about? What metrics should marketers be focusing on if that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, the honest truth is that you need to pay attention to all the metrics. Campaign metrics are important. The problem is that we've given them too much weight, and we've looked at them to the exclusion of other things. You're right. There's the way that I like to think about metrics is in a few different buckets. So there's like sort of these channel campaign metrics. So that's like your opens and your clicks, and those are important for seeing how one campaign did versus another campaign. There's channel health campaigns. So that's things like your bounce rates, your unsubscribe rates, your complaint rates. Those are important. But to your point, business executives don't care about really any of those, right? They don't care about the channel health, although you need to maintain channel health to have success. And they don't really care about the campaigns that much either. I mean, what do they care about? They care about sort of top line numbers, or at least they should. They should care about, how much revenue is it bringing in? How is it helping us retain, our subscription clients? Things like that. And I think the smart companies are also focusing, again, on this sort of like, the customer is our inventory, and looking at things like customer lifetime value, which is a metric that I truly love. I feel like it should be everybody's North Star. And it's a small but growing number of brands are tracking that. I think we're somewhere like in the mid-teens of adoption of that metric.
Yeah, we use the term here, which is a more encompassing measure of customer health, which is really a composite index of CLV amongst other key measures, loyalty being obviously another one.
Yeah, I sometimes talk about subscriber lifetime value. So kind of zooming in on email a little bit. And so in that case, you're looking at how much value is that subscriber generating? What's their time on list? Are we keeping them on the list for a long period of time, or are they churning off quickly? So like,
isn't the challenge there though is attribution, frankly? I mean, isn't the challenge for digital marketing period? Last touch attribution is really, can be deceiving, certainly. Is the challenge here that it's actually difficult to segregate what provides incremental lift? I mean, how can you attribute email marketing is just one part of a communication stream or a larger marketing picture or a larger investment? Isn't that a bit of the challenge? Is how do you figure out what you can actually attribute to the email touches versus other ways that you interact with customers?
Absolutely. I believe that if you're using last touch or first touch, that you're just wildly out of sync with how consumers shop today. I think there was some research that we did with, I think it was, I don't remember who it was with, but Oracle did some research with some partners. And I think that in like the early 2000s, like consumers, when they were buying something, like tended to engage with like an average of 2 touch points. And I think today it's like almost 6. And like that's how people shop. They shop and they're influenced by lots of different events, and it's not the first one and it's not the last one. And so the politics of attribution models, I think, is really, really thorny because we're still largely organized around channels. And so there's competitive groups, and I feel like we've got a little bit of like a Montgomery Ward set up for failure, where Montgomery Ward like collapsed because it was constantly encouraging groups within itself to like battle each other out for budget. And what you need is a collaborative way of working together. And I think that email marketers, and I think companies in general, are making great strides towards being more collaborative and recognizing that, hey, look, we have an omni-channel customer. We need to act like an omni-channel company. People don't go and experience a marketing channel, right? They go and they experience a brand. And so we need to have that coherence. But in terms of just email marketing, it's tricky because I think traditionally email marketing has been undercredited with the influence that it wields because we tend to just measure what's easy.
Like open rate.
Well, but that direct flow, like, we send an email, someone opens it, then they click and they go to our landing page and they convert. Like, that's nice, right? We would love, I call that the golden path. We would love for everybody to do that.
Life isn't that linear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, people are not linear. People are really, really weird. They do what suits them best. So they could receive an email, see that subject line, that from name, and then turn off their computer, hop in their car, and like go to your store and buy, or talk to their spouse about doing, and then the spouse might do something. There's all kinds of ways that email has influence and gets zero credit. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more of our clients do is running what are called withhold studies, or even running what's called a universal
group,
holdout group. Yeah. So that's where you essentially take groups of your subscribers and you withhold campaigns from them, and then you compare, their performance and engagement to folks who are getting email. And that gives you like probably the cleanest look at what that lift is from your email marketing program, because sometimes we love to think everything we do is magical in email marketing, but sometimes we send campaigns or we set up automations that don't actually change behavior because people were going to do that anyway. So yeah, with holdout groups are a really fantastic way to see that. But in general, I think email marketers don't get enough credit. But to your earlier point, I think attribution models are majorly broken, sort of across the board and kind of out of sync. And whatever kind of blended attribution model you can come up with, even though it's absolutely not going to be accurate, it's going to be better than if you're just using first or last click. I'm a huge proponent of useful metrics, that metrics don't have to be accurate to be useful. And I think sometimes in this sort of data-driven age that we're in, we seek perfection in numbers that go well beyond like being useful.
Well, we get lost in a sea of numbers and can't extract the insights out of it all as a result of it. I think in part because maybe what you talked about earlier, strategy formulation, setting goals, etc., is so skewed in any case. It starts really at the top, I think, which brings me to this subject of organizational design. Because we use that term email marketers, we use it's really this channel marketing mindset. In the more advanced organizations that are making full use of email marketing properly, if I may put it that way, what do you see as a trend there in terms of how organizations are structuring around their communications with customers and how they're optimizing their email programs as a result of it? Are you seeing any significant trends there with respect to how organizations approach this whole subject that we've been talking about?
Yeah, well, as we certainly have already talked about, I think omni-channel orchestration is really important. So being able to coordinate email marketing messaging in other channels, which obviously should always be tailored to that channel. So you shouldn't be using the same messaging everywhere. It should be a nice twist.
But who provides the oversight, the governance? Who drives the strategy across channels? There's one of the challenges today is obviously the fragmentation that exists within companies, the stovepipe organizational structures. Certainly, the shift to agile is changing that to some degree. Multidisciplinary groups forming around particular projects or programs or even campaigns. But in terms of where email fits, who governs that and who they report up to, what are you seeing out there today amongst the more advanced practitioners?
Yeah, I still think it's largely the CMOs that are controlling all of that. One of the things that has been a byproduct of the pandemic is that there's been such rapid change in consumer behaviors. There's been a premium put on speed and agility. And so that has caused a lot of, I think, positive changes in terms of having different disciplines talking more together to coordinate messages, and this focus on speed. So in email marketing, we've seen a lot of adoption of modular email architecture, which we've done a lot of those in recent years, and it tends to reduce email production time by anywhere from like 25 to 40%. So like really a much faster way to build emails. And it also just so happens that a modular approach also is fantastic for A/B testing, fantastic for personalization. But we've seen like this really high focus on speed and being able to pivot really quickly, during this time of like really kind of upheaval, right? Like people are just, they're changing really rapidly. We're going to have probably more changes, in the year ahead, and that's really put a premium on making sure that we get the basics right and can move swiftly and put a renewed focus on personalization, which in some ways puts control in the hands of subscribers and then consumers.
Let's talk about that, because we did reference it earlier. You hear this term personalization at scale a lot these days. How does that apply to email marketing? Go back to what are you seeing as the best practices here in meaningful personalization, in achieving truly breakthrough results? What are you seeing out there in terms of trends?
Yeah, so I think it's worth recognizing where we've come from. So when I started 15-ish years ago, personalization was a first name mail merge, essentially putting the subscriber's name either in the subject line or in the body content and addressing them by name. And that was it. That was largely what personalization was. So let's appreciate how far we've come now that we're using machine learning and AI to like sort through tons of SKUs, tons of pieces of content, and then analyzing affinities and recognizing patterns to be able to bring the right content in front of people. I think that's kind of amazing, and I think it's pretty fantastic to see how companies like Spotify and Netflix and Amazon, these like sort of like mammoth SKU organizations where they just have tons and tons of content, how good of a job they do at really elevating the right content for people that makes them feel recognized, which is the goal today, right? I mean, nowadays, if you put someone's name in a subject line, you're almost as likely to turn them off as you are to get them excited, because it's become such an empty gesture. I think it's a thing that a lot of phishers and spammers do, right? It doesn't really mean anything. What consumers today want to see is, have you been paying attention? And are you using the data that you collect about me to serve me, right, to make my life better, and help me discover new ways to be fulfilled? And absolutely, when we talk about personalization at scale, we're talking about AI and ML. Like that's the future. And we're very much in the early days. I think a lot of email marketing trends and a lot of digital marketing trends have like pretty long tails. And I feel like right now we're maybe in that sort of awkward adolescent phase with AI and ML. And I think we see evidence of that sort of all around us. When even companies like Facebook and YouTube don't do a fantastic job of it, I think that shows us like we have a long way to go.
Is the obstacle there, Chad, the fact that organizations still are struggling with data, that the idea of a unified customer profile or a single view of the truth, whatever expression you want, golden record, whatever expression you want, organizations are still struggling with that. And until that straightens out, proper use of personalization or AI or any of these more advanced techniques will flounder if the underlying data is not correct or consistent or comprehensive enough.
Yeah, I think that is a place where some companies have a lot of advantage, right? So like a Netflix has like a single door that they operate in and out of. And so I think for them, it's a lot easier for them to keep like a clean set of data. But you're absolutely right. If you're a multi-channel retailer, you've got a lot of doors to pay attention to. And you do need something like a CDP to get that golden record, to get everything all in one place. And that's obviously a really hot area right now. An area of focus for Oracle, frankly. But we've been talking about that for a long time. Like I remember, back when I was at, Salesforce, like an ExactTarget, we were talking about the same thing. Like that was many, many years ago. We were talking about that 360-degree view of the customer. And, that was aspirational at that time. But it feels very within reach right now. And it's not easy, but there are tools now where you can actually achieve that on a level that seriously moves the needle. And that's exciting. That's super exciting because, again, customers live in an omni-channel world, and brands, as always, are playing catch up and trying to act like a singular brand. And right now, a lot of them don't act that way unless they have, like a Netflix, one door.
So you've mentioned Netflix, Amazon, et cetera, the pure plays, obviously having an easier time of it, as you say. If you look outside that very small circle of companies, maybe you could include the direct-to-consumer companies would fall into that category as well, I would imagine. But outside of that, FIs, telcos, et cetera, other industries, who would you look to as models of email marketing today? What companies stand out in your mind, and why do they stand out from the rest of the crowd?
Yeah, I do think there are lots of different ways to stand out. Certainly, a company, like a Netflix or an Amazon, like we know what they're about, right? They're about, data. They're not really about personality in any way. And I think that there is a lot of room for personality. I think sometimes we get confused, like about what it is that we turn to a company for. I don't turn to Amazon for any personality or anything. I turn to them for.
It's a transactional relationship.
It's a very transactional relationship, and so in some ways, like, that could be undone at some point if somebody could match them, because that's all that they're about. But they do that so well. That's why they are obviously incredibly successful. But I think about brands like Uncommon Goods, which has like a great voice. They have products you can't get anywhere else. I think in today's environment, I don't know how very many brands compete without private label goods or exclusive goods. Like, I feel like that's like one of the ways you can push back against Amazon. Otherwise you're left playing Amazon's game, right? Where you're trying to, have a vast selection and speed to delivery, which actually speed to delivery has been one of the areas where I think a lot of other big box retailers have done so much better. Like the Best Buys of the world, like really fast delivery now in a way that several years ago they weren't anywhere close to what Amazon was able to do. But I think, again, you got to like focus on, what is it that you're turning to this brand for? So again, like someone like Uncommon Goods, I really like because they have a unique voice, a ModCloth, unique products, unique voice, an REI, where they have like a very particular brand voice, brand values that are really clear. Someone like Quicksilver, also very clear. Patagonia, very clear like brand values, which are really important.
And it makes it easier to have conversations with those customers because there's shared passion, shared interest, and a shared worldview, if you will. to give you a reason to engage and have a dialogue with those customers.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really interesting is I love the intersection of email and loyalty. And I see loyalty programs as sort of like the next level up from an email marketing program. I see it as like that second stage. Like if you have a great email marketing program, you should totally have a loyalty program. And the exciting thing that's happening right now with loyalty is that traditionally loyalty programs have been all about like spend to get. So I spend X amount of money, I get X amount of points, and I can use those points to get other stuff.
It's a quid pro quo relationship.
Yeah, it's very transactional, and that's really like unraveling in a big, nice way right now. And you're starting to see loyalty programs really become sort of engagement-based communities. So, for instance, Nike has a very good loyalty program. That's all about like sports and fitness and sure, they're trying to sell Nike goods, but it's about, people don't get excited about like, just buying things as much anymore. They want to be a part of something, and they want to, they want experiences, and they also like want to like reinforce like their own brand, their own personal brand identity. And so Nike's loyalty program does that. Sleep Number is another good one. They're one of our Oracle CrowdTwist clients. That's a really interesting one because their program is all about getting a great night's sleep. It's not about selling another mattress. It's about this community of people that want to get just an awesome night's sleep. And so they have lots of polls and lots of content about, the right kinds of pillows and like, do you crack your window at night and what kind of blankets do you use and do you sleep with your pet and all this stuff about, how do I get a better night's sleep? Like that's their passion. And the goal there, again, isn't to sell another mattress to someone who already has a Sleep Number bed. It's to have these people become evangelists for the brand and bring in that next new customer.
Well, and so you make a good point. The concept of community is a bonding agent. And I'm not sure you mentioned it earlier, but the integration of social media and email marketing has been really a powerful partnership in many respects. It's become very tightly integrated. Look at how LinkedIn advises you through email of a post by a colleague, just to give you a simple example, or Facebook as a similar thing. There's been a nice sort of symbiotic relationship there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, social is another one of those channels that was supposed to kill email, right? Like, so I mean, you alluded, at the top of our conversation about how email is like the Rodney Dangerfield of like communication channels. It doesn't get any respect, and I think this is, really a result of the fact that like nobody owns email marketing, right? It's what I call granted media, or it has lots of different kind of owners, and is largely kind of owned by consumers in many ways, and controlled by them. And because of that, it makes it a very inexpensive channel because they have this distributed sort of ownership. But like nobody's defending email because nobody owns it, right? So like, when you attack Facebook, Facebook responds because they're Facebook. But when you attack email, like there's really nobody who stands up for email. So it does get kicked around an awful lot. And it's funny to watch the patterns. Like so what, Facebook Messenger, that was supposed to kill email, and like Google Wave was supposed to kill email. At one point I saw someone saying RSS was going to kill email, which is just ridiculous. But we do go through these ebbs and flows where this sort of like enthusiasm about email is sort of up and down. And for instance, coming out of the early, like the first year of the pandemic, I think email marketing was like on a high, right? Like email was the channel that brands use to communicate to their customers about, their new, COVID policies and store restrictions, and empathizing with them and talking about what they were doing to protect, their employees. All this stuff. I mean, email was just incredibly central and really magical to having, a really good conversation with customers. And I feel like that glow lasted until Apple came out with MPP, and then all of a sudden we were back to like, oh no, MPP is going to kill email, and email is going to go away.
So you're right. There was a lot of hand wringing around Apple Apple's mail privacy protection. There was the sky is falling attitude for sure. Have things quieted down there? And I want to ask you something because you raised an interesting point in one of your blogs about. I'm paraphrasing here to some extent, but it will force marketers to be looking more broadly at the concept of engagement, of interest. I think you were talking about, and one of the things I think was really interesting about that statement was this idea of intent signals, that we need to be able to read the customer's behavior, the consumer behavior across a number of channels, and be able to derive from that a level of interest and engagement with your brand that will, in fact, determine whether you're successful with your communications more broadly. In other words, we get out of the trap of looking at open rates as an example, or even just merely click-throughs on an email. What's your perspective on that? Is it, I guess, we're going to force marketers to be better marketers, despite all the hand-wringing and woe is me that followed the announcement of that change?
I think there are definitely some positive things about MPP, and I think one of them is that it's going to drive marketers to look farther down the funnel and to look more broadly at the experience of their subscribers and their customers. I think that's all a plus. I have very mixed feelings about MPP. I understand why some of it was done, but I do feel so for instance, we don't really need to know the location of our subscribers to the degree that we knew before. I don't think we used it in any nefarious way. We used it to populate maps of the nearest store or the nearest restaurant. So I don't think it was abused, but at the same time, I accept that we probably didn't need that. You could collect that in another way. But I do feel like we got kind of tarred by what the advertising industry was doing and what the web industry was doing. Because email marketing is largely a permission-based channel. You don't need it, to be honest, but people want it. But you can have a fully functional life with very little email, in terms of opting in for promotional emails, which I feel like is what we're talking about when we're talking about MPP. That's what they seem to couch it as, is that all these marketers were doing nefarious things, but there's not really, there was nothing nefarious going on. But I feel like right now it's just very trendy, and certainly Apple is kind of staking their brand on privacy for sure. But to get back to your original question, the thing that is problematic about what Apple did, and it's even problematic for Apple Mail, is that opens were the primary way that brands determined whether or not someone was engaged with an email from a deliverability point of view, to be able to manage engagement levels. So that was essentially the metric that marketers use when they were putting together their audience for an email. They'll say, hey, has this subscriber opened an email in the last 12 months, for instance? And they look at all the subscribers that did that, and they'd be like, all right, that's the safe audience to mail. And so if you weren't opening, if you weren't engaging on that sort of simplistic level of just an open, you would stop getting emails, or you would go into a program where you received way fewer emails, or you would start to be sort of kind of phased out. And that's a very good thing. Again, I talked about earlier engagement-based spam filtering pioneered by Gmail. Opens is what it kind of comes down to in the end. And opens were a fantastic signal to be able to create these active email marketing audiences, so we knew who to email and who not to, right? I talked about respectful email experiences. Knowing when to stop emailing folks is part of that bottom foundational layer of the hierarchy of subscriber needs. And Apple has taken away part of our ability to see that. So by necessity, we have to look at other metrics, and email clicks is an easy one to go for. But there tend to be, or traditionally have been 8 times more opens than clicks. So clicks are just not a frequent enough signal to be able to just rely on that alone. So you need other signals. And so yes, marketers are going to have to go broader. They're going to have to look at essentially customer activity and use that as a proxy for subscriber activity, because they've got no other choice. I mean, it'd be great if there was some other way to do it, but there's really not. And
well, we call it here an engagement score. That if you can, that should be a key target for most marketers, is to drive that engagement score up. It means interest in the brand. I just want to take advantage. Like, we have a few minutes remaining here, Chad, and I do want to ask you another loaded question. I apologize for this in advance, but you've alluded from the beginning about all of the changes, the current email marketing over the years. It keeps it interesting. What's ahead that's going to keep it interesting for you? What's on the horizon here in terms of shifts in the industry that you will be able to continue to write about and perhaps have a fourth edition of your book?
Well, I think that probably the most exciting thing long term is AI and machine learning. We've talked sort of forever about the right message to the right person at the right time, and increasingly in an omni-channel world, we're talking about the right channel as well. And AI and ML has contributions to make to all of those decisions. So we talked a lot about personalizing content with ML. So that's the right message. Also, copyright, AI-powered copywriting tools, like trying to say things in the right way that are going to appeal to your subscribers or groups of your subscribers. That is, a nascent but growing tool set. I think long term, there's tons of promise there. The issue right now is that some of those recommendations are not on brand voice, but long term, lots of promise there for getting the right message. Send time optimization, the timing of automation, getting the right time, that's really valuable. AI and ML are going to do wonders there. Already it's probably the earliest place where they've had great success. So that's really important. That right person is that audience segmentation, suppression decisions. I think, again, because of MPP, like that equation is getting more and more complicated. And so I think there's going to be a role there to play for machine learning to be able to help us select audiences based on some patterns and things that we can't see with the naked eye. And then right channel is channel affinity, which again also is complicated. I love email. Email has a strong role to play, but sometimes email is not the right channel for a particular subscriber, for a particular message. And we have things here at Oracle, like what we call the intelligent switch, that allows ML to help make those decisions when it's appropriate. So I think you're going to see a lot more AI and ML in the future. That's going to be exciting. I mean, there's the potential for the creation of an email to be like kind of fundamentally changed, where email marketers spend a lot more time making content blocks and not making emails per se, and even having AI constructing, deciding what modules to put in an email. I do hope that again, we don't lose all that curation, because I think that's important for discovery. But I think in the years, if I'm looking ahead like the next decade, I think that's the trend where we're going to see some really significant strides that are going to be great for subscribers and great for businesses too.
Just in concluding, though, too, email itself as a construct, the idea that it started out really as a stepping stone to drive somebody to a web page and began to become more interactive, more interesting on its own, it becomes more of an experience than certainly even than it is today. Would you say that's certainly a direction that the industry is going to go in as well? Especially with the arrival of 5G, where the bandwidths will allow for more creative, if you will, use of the technology?
I think we're in a little bit of a pivot point. I'm not really sure which direction we're going to go. We've had CSS-based interactivity for a while. We now have AMP for email. But I'm a little hot-cold on AMP. I think, and not because of AMP itself, or because of Gmail or anything. I think the pandemic, unfortunately, has just taken a lot of the wind out of AMP sales. Everyone's like trying to get simple and lean and fast, and that's the opposite of AMP. AMP is, and you essentially create an entirely new email to send along with your HTML campaign. So I think AMP does like really, amazing things. I love this idea of doing more in the inbox because studies and experiences have shown that that's more efficient. Like fewer clicks is good for everybody. It makes for a more seamless, frictionless experience. I'm just not sure that I feel like we've lost a lot of momentum there. So honestly, I don't know which way that's going to go. It might be that we wash a little bit back towards, email being that gateway to an app, to a landing page, on the web. We'll see how that shakes out. I'm not totally sure on that one. I kind of have a bad feeling that we're going to wash back towards the gateway model, but we'll see. It kind of depends on a little bit, if things settle down, if the pandemic starts to wind down, if there's less social upheaval, because those are the things that frankly are driving people towards this like lean, nimble posture. And I feel like that posture is not conducive to interactivity.
That concludes my interview with Chad White. As we learned, email marketing has come a long way from the batch and blast era. Back then, it was used as a promotional hammer, driving sales purely on the basis of mail volume. But after people rebelled, it became much harder to slip past the spam barricades. So, marketers had to get smarter at the basics, like proper list hygiene, capturing subscriber preferences, improving HTML design, conducting more rigorous A/B testing, complying with privacy laws, and optimizing send times. Their efforts eventually paid off in higher open and engagement rates. Today, the combination of better databases, machine learning, and more integrated drag-and-drop workflow design can take email marketing to the next level, making it a truly one-to-one customer experience. Before that can happen, however, marketers will have to treat email marketing as a more prestigious channel, giving it the long overdue attention and respect it deserves. You can find past episodes of this podcast on customerfirstthinking.ca, where you'll also find articles, strategic frameworks, video, and more on the transformation of marketing. In closing, a big shout out to my friends and colleagues Justin Eacock and Shak Rana for their contribution to making this podcast happen. Until next time, thanks for listening.